Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to this special edition of the Game Changer Podcast. I am your host, Nate the Effing Great, and I am being joined here by quite possibly one of those guys who I definitely would say is one of the most passionate about professional wrestling, especially here in Wisconsin. One of the proprietors of Frontline Pro, the one, the only, probably one of the heart and soul people that I can think about of professional wrestling when it comes to the state of Wisconsin, that being the one and only Ben McCoy. How's it going, good sir?
That's good, man. That's a hell of an intro. Thank you.
Well, I always pride myself on trying to make it that, people feel welcomed here, that they don't feel, awkward or anything like that. And I always try to go above and beyond when it comes to the intros. But honestly, it's great to have you on here. I've honestly been looking forward to having you on for quite some time. Ever since we talked about it, I was like, yes, get Ben McCoy on here. This is going to be awesome. Get to talk about wrestling, get to talk about a lot of stuff, and including, we're going to talk about the Frontline Pro show that's coming up in Stevens Point in just a matter of weeks. That's going to be very awesome to talk about.
Yes, it is. I'm excited for it.
So, one thing I like to ask new guests when they come on is the question of what got you interested, as well as what keeps you passionate about professional wrestling. What got you interested? What kind of hooked you in to want to be a professional wrestler, as well as, keep the passion for this sport?
Oh, man. I think I was 4, or I want to say I was about 3 or 4, when I became the first vivid memory of professional wrestling. It was a Saturday Night Main Event rerun on NBC that showed the replay of WrestleMania 3. And it was going into WrestleMania 4 at that time, so it was kind of like they had recapped Andre and Hogan when they were going to face each other in the tournament at WrestleMania 4. And so the very first thing of professional wrestling, luckily for me, that I saw was Hulk Hogan body slamming Andre the Giant at WrestleMania 3 on my television. And I think it was like 5 in the morning. And it was on a Sunday. And it's just one of those things that I'll never forget. And I've been hooked into it ever since then. And growing up, I was very lucky to be able to watch some of the best wrestlers, of our generation, all time in our generation. The Shawn Michaels, the Bret Harts, the Stone Cold Steve Austins, and the list goes on. And it's funny to me how nowadays, back in the day, it was the larger than life characters that drew me in as a child, and now as a wrestler, it's the art of wrestling that keeps me interested. It's so funny. I actually just wrestled last weekend in Illinois, and I won my 25th title. And I compared it to, I was 35 winning this belt, and then I compared it to when I won my first title when I was 22. And it's just so funny how what keeps me interested in it now is completely different than when I started my journey. Because when I started, it was about titles. It was about being the best. It was about proving my worth. And now it's about wrestling guys I've never wrestled before, telling great stories, helping new talent enhance and get farther into the business, and just honestly trying to give back to wrestling as much as it's given to me.
That is absolutely awesome. I always notice that with a lot of wrestlers, is that they always try to transition from wanting to be there for the fame and then for the glory, but then they turn it into an actual passion, into something that they really love doing, and also helping breeding the next generation so that they're ready for all the trials and tribulations that comes with being a pro wrestler.
Absolutely, and for me, it super hits home because my son is training to be a wrestler now. He's going to be 16 next month, and I think actually 2 days after our point show, he's going to turn 16, and he is training and has been training in Milwaukee to become a pro wrestler. So to be the dad still in the business wrestling, and then to have a kid who's by the end of this year is going to be ready to start having matches, it's a trip and a half.
So you're saying that probably by the end of the year we might see a next generation of McCoy in the ring?
I can guarantee that. Yeah, no, that'll definitely happen.
Dang.
For sure.
Watch out, Wisconsin. McCoys are taking over. So, obviously, starting off, you mentioned your first title run, and obviously going into the early stages of professional wrestling, everybody has said that it's never easy. Just those first few days, the first few times of training. Talk to us and walk us through what was it like for your first day in training when you were on this road to be a professional wrestler.
Oh man, it was a different time then. I don't think wrestling, both on screen and behind the scenes, has evolved and changed so much from when I started. I started in 2005, And back then it was still the Wild West. It was like, I like to call it 1899, because it was, cars were coming in and the horses and the cowboys were being driven out, and it was kind of the end of the era. And we were there, myself and Justin Dredd, Nick Colucci, guys like that, my brother Chase, and we kind of had to grow up into this crazy backwards world of wrestling that still believed in kayfabe and still believed in pounding rookies into the dirt to make them earn their spots, still believed in the hazing and the ribbing and the let's treat these guys as absolutely horrible as we possibly can to get them out, so that only the strong ones stay in, and then those ones that can take the punishment, those are the guys we'll let stay and hang around. And I can remember my first day of training. I think there were 16 kids at Bruce City Wrestling down in Waukesha, and the Beer City Bruiser was my trainer along with Frank DeFalco. And I just remember we had 16 kids the first day, and then we did a chop line where 28 guys chopped us all, and each got a turn. And I remember going home and bleeding from the chest, and it looked like I had had 1,000 handprints on me, and it was pretty gnarly and hurt for a while. And it was one of those things where we came back for the second one, and all of a sudden it went from 16 guys to 6 guys. So it was a steep drop off. And then after that, I think from that graduating class, only myself and Mario Crivello are the only ones left. Everybody else phased out, throughout the years. So.
Wow. And I mean, I joke about this whole deal with Chop City. I went to that when you guys came to Stevens Point show, and there's that lineup of guys, and kind of how you described it almost kind of seemed like the same deal that I went through. Only sounds like you had worse for wear on your chest than I did after all the guys chopped me up a good few times.
How many guys got you?
I think it was about 8 or 9. I would say.
Yeah, dude. When you get closer to 30. And you got big, heavy-handed guys that aren't around anymore, but guys that were legit. Your Silas Youngs, your Dysfunctions, your Xavier Mustafas, your Matt Winchesters, Rashi Browns, all these guys that are 250 or higher, and they're 6'5" or taller and can hit like an oak tree. I think the specific reason of it was to scare the ever-living shit out of everybody, to be honest with you. I don't have a better way to say it. It was to literally make people go, because there was guys that were there at that training camp that the second that chop line happened, 2 of them left before they had to get in the ring. Like, wow. They took off.
Wow, that's pretty crazy. So, and I'm guessing they probably had some rules like, if you flinch, you have to take double chops or something like that, huh?
They had things like that, and then, you were the rookie, you bought the vets their drinks, you drove them wherever you did, wherever they wanted to go, you got them anything you needed to do. Back in the day, you used to have to be a gopher, whether you were on the show or not. It didn't matter if you had the second match. If somebody said, hey, go grab me a beer, or go grab me a soda, or go grab me this, or go grab me that, and you're on in 5 minutes, too bad, go get me that before you go out. And you had to find a way. And, that doesn't happen anymore now, obviously. I think wrestling backstage is very PG-13 now. It's very, let's see what we can teach to everybody. Let's see what we can, how we can instill the youth and things of that. It's become much more of a teaching and training kind of profession, whereas it used to be, earning your stripes to get in the brotherhood. It's almost like joining the mob. I hate to say it, but it's like back in the day, it was like joining the mob. Like, all right, you gotta take this guy out to prove to us that you're loyal. Which was in their eyes was, hey, you need to take your shit kickings and shut your mouth and do what you're told. And if you're still here, then maybe possibly we might let you in. Okay. And it's so different now, because now it's how do I put it? Promoters. What I'll give credit for is back then promoters were much more selective and picky on who they let in, and the locker room, the boys were much more picky and selective of who they let in. Mm-hmm. Nowadays, again, it's much more professional, like business based. It's much more, well, if you have money, I'm going to take your money, for a lot of promoters. And it's not right. I'm not saying it's right. I don't agree with it. But there's a lot of promoters that'll, bring people in that don't have any business being in professional wrestling, that don't have any business, doing anything in wrestling, that don't have the athletic ability or the knowledge of being in the business. And it's not saying that, I'm not saying that, I'm not trying to sit here and sound like a bully or anything, but at the same time, you have to understand, I wouldn't want somebody doing heart surgery on me that can't stop shaking their hands. Right. You know what I mean? Like, I don't want someone, trying to save my life who can't, stop passing out every 5 seconds. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's kind of the same thing in wrestling where, and then the problem is there's a lot of people who do wrestling and then, are told, hey, this might not be for you, and they get their tax return and decide, hey, I'm going to start my own thing. And that's kind of popped back up again. It went away, and then it kind of came back, and now it's kind of going away again. But it's interesting times, to say the least. Yeah,
definitely. So for basically what you're telling me, it went from, and every man for himself, every man trying to, protect their reputation, to more of, hey, we're a team, we're working together to kind of build each other up instead of bring each other down most of the time.
Oh, yeah. I think guys look at, wrestlers today, and especially, I don't even say wrestlers, I want to say promoters today. A lot of promoters today look at it as, if we try to weed everybody out, there might not be anybody left. And you get what you pay for in professional wrestling. So, at the same time, there are great promotions that do things the right way. I just figured I got to go wrestle down in Chicago for freelance wrestling. I can't put Matt Nixon, his company, over enough. It is a top-notch organization that does phenomenal work, and the locker room is super tight, and everybody's on the same page and wants to make it better. And that's what you want in professional wrestling, is a group of as a locker room of guys that all have the same goal and the same mission. And I've had that. I had that a while back, and it was great. And now we're building that again in Frontline. So it's definitely much more of a productive business nowadays, I think, as compared to what it was before.
Definitely. It definitely sounds like that, and I'm very happy to see that. So obviously, with all the training that you went through, all the kind of crazy deals that you had to go through, all the initiation that you had to go through, builds up all to your first matchup. Was it nerve-wracking for you going into your first matchup, or were you more excited than nervous?
I was completely terrified because it wasn't supposed to happen.
Really?
It was December 3rd, 2005, Marinette, Wisconsin, at the Firehouse Bar and Grill for NWA Wisconsin, which is now WPW. And I wrestled Scotty Pride in the opening contest that night because a car full of Chicago guys got stuck in a snowstorm on the way up and couldn't make it to the show. And so with about 10 minutes to show, about an hour to show time, they came up to me and said, hey, did you bring gear? And I said, yeah. And then they just walked away. And then about 10 minutes later, they came up and said, hey, do you still have your gear? Yeah. Okay, you're on first. And I just remember Jason Jerry telling me, hey, you're on first. Give me 8 minutes. And just walked away. He said, don't worry, there's no finish. Guys are going to come beat you guys up. And he just walked away. And Scotty didn't have any gear. I had 2 pairs of gear, thank God. And so I covered both of us. And we went out and we didn't have a terrible match. And I remember walking to the back. And it's so funny because to this day, this is probably one of the compliments that I hold highest in regard, which is I walk to the back and Angel Armani stops me and looks at me and goes, hey, you know what? That wasn't half fucking bad. And for me, it was like, I wasn't horrible. This is the greatest day of my life. And because I had seen so many other rookies debut, and Armani and guys like that, Adrian Serrano, Dysfunction, Dinty Moore, Silas Young, Rashi Brown, those guys especially, if you were, Steve Stone as well, if you were not good, or if you didn't cut the mustard, they made sure you knew exactly how bad you sucked. And it was kind of cool that it wasn't like, don't get me wrong, nobody said I was good, nobody said it was okay. They just said, hey, you didn't suck, or hey, that wasn't half bad. So it was a good day, to say the least.
So you definitely made quite the first impression, to say the least.
I got lucky. We kept it very simple, and I listened to the training that Matt Winchester had given me about just paint by numbers, and we did that, and he made sure that we were going to be all right. So it was good.
Well, that's pretty awesome. I mean, it's kind of one of those things where I would kind of take of it as like a backhanded compliment, where it's just like, okay, he's kind of insulting me, but at the same time, he's at least saying I'm not, terrible. Like you said, he's not saying I suck. So I mean, that's still pretty awesome. First match out there, getting that kind of a compliment, sort of, kind of.
Oh, and you got to remember then, man, I had taken 3 months. Like, that happened, I was only training for 4 months.
Man.
Not even 4 months. September, so all of September, all of October, all of November. Yeah, December, very first week of 3 days into December. So I was training for just over 3 months, and it was a complete accident. It wasn't that I was good enough for it. It wasn't that I deserved it. I'll never sit here and say I deserved that first match, because I definitely didn't. I don't think I was ready, but they needed bodies. I was the body. And when you're in there and they call your number, it's one of those things where you go, okay, and you just hope not to suck.
So obviously, years of experience and everything like that paid off, and eventually you honed your craft so well that you went from out of state, and then you eventually went out of the country into Japan. How did the Japan thing kind of start out?
Oh man, that was completely by accident again, dude. My whole wrestling career is just by right place, right time, and sheer luck. It's not that I'm good. Everybody just thinks I'm good, but I'm not. It's completely luck. So I had wrestled from 2005 to 2010. Took 4 years. Went and joined the military. Obviously, we all know my story there. Came back full time in 2016, and was doing ring rentals because I had bought my own ring and was renting my ring out to other companies. And actually did a show down at the Summerfest grounds for Angel Armani for his MIAW show. Down there, which was for Italian Fest, and it was a great time. We had a lot of fun, and his shows are always really good to be on. And Shigehiro Ida from Japan was there. He was actually staying with Cole Cabana at the time. Well, Cabana picked up a tour somewhere. I can't remember where. I want to say France, and couldn't have Shige stay there because he wasn't going to be there. And so Shige had nowhere to live. And so I called my wife and I said, can we adopt a Japanese wrestler? And she said, sure. And so he came and lived with me for 3 months. And my daughters taught him English by reading him Disney books and watching Beauty and the Beast every day. Oh. So he's a very big Beauty and the Beast mark. So, so then my wife and I, he went back to Japan. My wife and I wanted to do our honeymoon. We had never done one because when we got married, we had $47 in the bank account. Mm-hmm. So we were young and broke and poor, and it was never really an option. So we finally wanted to go, and we were originally going to go to Paris, and then the terrorist attacks happened, and so that completely turned my wife off on that. And so then we decided, well, what about Japan? She's a huge Disney fan as well, and Japan has a place called Disney Sea in Tokyo, and it's the only place in the world that has this place, and it's like the home of Ariel and Aladdin and all that other stuff, and it's its own thing, but it's the only place in the world, and that's the only place that you can get it or go to see it. And so we decided on going there. And so I called Shige and said, hey, I'm coming to Japan. We're going to do our honeymoon thing. We're going to take a vacation. I just want to let you know so we can hook up. And all I wanted out of it, man, was to just go eat steak at Ribera with him. That was literally the only reason for the call. And so then he goes, okay, that's awesome. You're so happy about it. And then he called me back about 20 minutes later, and he goes, do you want to have wrestling matches when you come over? And I was like, yeah, sure, that'd be great. And then the next thing you know, man, I'm wrestling Taka Michinoku in the middle of Chiba City. So it was a trip.
Wow. I mean, still, even for an accident, that's quite the opportunity.
Yeah, man. And then I was really proud of the first tour I did there. I really felt like I had earned their respect, and I had earned my place there. They were awesome and asked me to come back 2 months later in August to compete in the DDT Ganbear Climax tournament. Myself and Dave Christ from OVE, we both got into that as the only Americans, and that's a really proud moment for me to be selected for that. And we had a great second tour there, and then going this last time in November for my third tour with Justin Dredd and Vic Capri, and going over there with Mad Dog USA was easily my favorite trip of all of them. I love my trip with my wife there, the first one, but it's different when it's that's your wife, that's a family. It's as much family stuff as it is wrestling, whereas our last tour was just all wrestling, and it was nuts, man. We had an MDC party night where We shoved 50 people into this bar that probably could have held 20, and everybody paid like $50-$60 just to eat food with us and hang out. And it's just, it was mind-boggling. So, and then to be on a show and you're all of a sudden you're wrestling with Kota Ibushi and Fujinami and Sema and Takuma Jinoku and David Hart Smith Jr. and Lance Archer and guys like that, and it's just, it's kind of beyond your scope of like, I never thought this would happen. So it's been interesting.
Yeah, it just sounds absolutely amazing and wonderful. And obviously one of the questions that a lot of people do have is, how do the, American crowds compare to the crowds over in Japan? Are they more enthusiastic? Are they more passionate about the wrestling? How do they kind of compare?
Wrestling fans in America are very boisterous. They want to be part of the show. They want to be interactive. And that's what they love about it. They love that they can be passionate about it and really, throw themselves into the show. It is completely opposite in Japan. It's real there. Like, there's baseball and there's professional wrestling, and they are treated the same. Professional wrestlers in Japan are treated the same as Major League Baseball players in Japan. There is no difference. The fans there are so appreciative and generous and respectful of what you do and how you do it, and it's just so funny because you do something good and it's like a golf clap, like for when you hit a birdie on 17 from 25 feet out and you get the golf clap. Like, you do a big move in Japan and that's what you get is the golf clap, and it's very different. I remember being very culture shocked with it the first time I went, thinking, am I doing stuff wrong? What am I doing? Do they think I suck? And then as the match went on, you could tell, oh no, this is how they react to wrestling. This is just how they appreciate it. So it's very, very real over there. I mean, there's fans that'll take wrestlers out for dinner and stuff like that. Myself and Dave Christ and Yanni, we all went to a place called Pepper Lunch with the War Raiders, Hanson and Rome, and we all grabbed lunch there, and they had a fan buy them all their stuff, all their food, and like drive them there, drive them back. We had a fan do it with me and Dredd and Vic, driving you two places to eat just to spend time with you. Like, you're kind of like a treasure there, which is, you feel super important. So let's just say that Japan is always going to have a firm place in my heart. Okinawa especially is, like, I love the Big Island with Tokyo and Nagoya and all the places there, but Okinawa is my home away from home. If I ever am able to retire and move somewhere, it'll be to Okinawa. I love that place. It's very near and dear to my heart, and if I could wrestle in Okinawa for the rest of my life, I would. So
yeah, I mean, Okinawa, Japan. I think that was also like the basis of where what was that one character, Mr. Miyagi? That's where like he was based off or something like that.
It really was, yeah. And it is a fishing village. That's not bullshit. Like, it legitimately is. So
wow. So you get to learn something where it's like, oh wow, they were not lying in this movie. That's a first, I think. Yeah. So obviously, over the many years that you've wrestled a lot of different characters, and I've had the opportunity to see you wrestle some of these characters and tremendous athletes. If you had to pick maybe a top 5 of people who you love wrestling or you've had great storylines with, who would you probably pick would be your top 5 favorite people to work with?
Top 5 favorite people to work with. Okay, here we go. Number 5 would be Doc Dingo from Japan. Every time we work together, whether it's a tag or against each other, we've always had a blast, and we think very similar, and our styles are very very well meshed together. So it's always fun doing stuff there. Number 4 would be Dysfunction. I think Dis and I, at the beginning of my career, I couldn't have asked for a better dance partner. And actually, I'll say he's in a tie with Steve Stone. Those two guys, took me when I was green and didn't know my ass from my elbow, and really were able to squeeze good matches out of me beyond the scope of what I thought I was capable of. So those two guys, they'll share that spot. let's see here. Right after them would probably be Silas Young and Matt Winchester. I think it was because every time I had matches with them, I always wanted to earn their respect so much. I was really just wanted to prove I belonged. And I think when you wrestle your trainer, you have that mentality. And it's one of those things with Silas where it was, Silas wasn't in ROH yet when we had wrestled, but at the same time, I always looked at him as the number one guy in the state, the number one guy in the Midwest, and if I could hang with him, I could do something. Like maybe I was good enough to stick around and not just be an opening guy or a mid card guy. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but I wanted so much more. I wanted to be the guy that a company could look at and say, hey, we're going to go with you. And wrestling Silas, we had two really beautiful matches that I still love to this day for ICW, and I hold them in very high regard. And then 2 and 1 are very easy. Number 2 is just Justin Dredd. Anytime me and Dredd work, we turn our brains off and just kind of magic happens. I don't think there's not a whole lot to go over. We just kind of go out there and we have this freaky ESP with each other that just works. It also helps that when we were younger and we started in the business, we were kind of married to each other for 2 years and literally kicked the shit out of each other in like 10 different states, so that helped. But as we went on and coming back in 16 to now, I've loved all the matches we've had, and we just worked in ACW for Josh Weimer and them over in Oshkosh, and had a really nice match I was really proud of. And then number 1, without a doubt, is Sadist. I wrestled him a year ago. It'll be a year ago and 5 days. 5 days from now, it will be exactly 1 year to the day that me and him worked, and he gave me the best match of my career, hands down, wrestling him at the first Frontline show in Spencer. And going, you want to talk about a guy who's amazing. How would you think about a guy who's 258 pounds and has a motor and can go 35 minutes? Because that doesn't happen. And he's just so smart. He's probably one of the smartest visionaries as far as wrestling goes, putting matches together, drawing the most emotion out of the crowd, delivering so much, and then obviously when I did my first comeback match after getting shot and doing that at GLCW for Dave Hero at the Waukesha County Expo Center for Blizzard Brawl, there was nobody else that was on the list to come back and fight. It was just I'm going to break kayfabe here. It was just Steve. He was the only guy that I trusted with my face at the time. He was the only guy that I thought I could even have a chance at doing a decent match with, and I still look back at that match and I absolutely love it. We were so dedicated to that match. He gained 20 pounds for that match, and I lost 40 pounds for that match to really get over the David versus Goliath part of the story. And he will always be number 1 on my book, and I'm just sad that we can't have another one.
Honestly, I will say this, that when I think of a lot of great wrestling matches here in Wisconsin, definitely one of the people that you do mention is indeed Sadist. So shout out to Sadist, one of the guys that we absolutely miss, and the fact that, I was there when he, announced his, retirement was definitely one of those things where I was just like, there go the feels, wrestling gives the feels, it's like the mixed emotions where it's like, I don't like it, but at the same time, happy for the guy that he's doing well for himself.
Absolutely.
So, guys, we're going to take a little quick commercial break. When we come back, we're going to talk a little bit about the genesis of Frontline Pro, as well as talk about the movie that is going to be coming out for Ben McCoy, with so many other things, and promotion for the Frontline Pro show that's going to be happening in Stevens Point in just a few weeks, guys. So stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Check out the guys over at Eclectic Media Project. They bring you podcasts such as Musically Challenged. Whose podcast is it anyway? Want to hear something interesting? And their newest podcast, Page 3.14 News. Check them out on Podbean and iTunes at Eclectic Media Project, on their website at www.eclecticmediaproject.com. Check them out as they are the home with a little something for almost everyone.
Hey guys, this is Nate the Effing Great. Hey, have you ever wanted to be a champion but can't seem to really find the money and the time to get a championship belt? Well, you know who's a really good friend of mine? AJ from AJsBelts.com. These guys have a large assortment of championship belts, from classic belts to the modern day belts to championship belts you would not even believe. And guys, like I said, they work with you very well. With an awesome layaway program, there is no way that you can beat these guys' prices as well as these guys' deals, especially when you can give them a little bit of money every now and then until you can get that championship gold. Coming from a guy who's a champion and a game changer, I'm indeed Nate the Effing Great. I'm representing AJsBelts.com, proud friends of the Game Changer Podcast. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the Game Changer. I'm Nate the Effing Great, being joined here by the one and only Ben McCoy from Frontline Pro. Alright, so this is going to get kind of interesting, guys, because I really don't always talk about certain subjects because of the fact that, I've been requested not to do them, or it's just uncomfortable, one of those things. But there are a couple of things that I did want to talk about with Mr. Ben. One of them concerned an incident that happened with one of the aptly named shows, WPW, that actually started off kind of the trend a little bit for the Stevens Point shows. They did about 3 shows in there, but now we're getting the Frontline Pro deal, which is going to be awesome, guys. Definitely, we're going to talk about some of the matches there. It's going to be absolutely amazing. But obviously, there was an incident that happened at WPW that really got a lot of people up in an uproar. And I even had people saying to me, "Hey, you know what happened? Do you know what happened?" I said, "No, what exactly happened?" So they kind of give me like bits, pieces, little details about what exactly happened to that, but I kind of would like to hear from one of the sources as to what exactly happened during that event, because I believe it happened last year, if I'm not mistaken.
It would have been at the anniversary show.
Yes.
That was my last day with WPW.
Okay.
It was, if you're talking about the incident that happened during the show, I can't really speak to that so much because I wasn't in it.
Okay.
I found out about it in the back locker room like everybody else.
Mm-hmm.
I was told, you'd have to talk to Michael Wayne about that. But he told me he was going to go out there and do one thing, and something else happened, and obviously there was a big deal about it. And when I asked him what the hell happened, he gave me his explanation. I didn't agree with it, but I understood it. I could see where he was coming from, and it was what it was. And I, on the other hand, was professional. Wrestled my match, dropped the title. And proceeded to inform the owner that was my last night there, that I was moving on, and gave him the list of reasons why, and that was it. The biggest thing is so many people. The only thing I don't like about this is so many people think they know. There's all of these people that heard this secondhand, heard that third hand, heard that fourth hand. The only people that know why I left WPW are the people that were in that conversation with the owner of WPW. So myself and the owner know, and the other people that decided that was also their last day know, and that's it. And it's one of those things where I had a wonderful 2 years at WPW. I loved being in the position that I was in. I had a great time for a long time with them, and things happened. Business mindsets kind of changed. Things that were kind of an understood agreement, began changing, and it just was one of those things where I wasn't happy. I was driving 2.5 hours one way to do this stuff, and when you're not happy doing what you're doing, it kind of makes you question, why am I doing this? And it's nothing against the owner there or WPW. I love the WPW fans. They were phenomenal the entire time I was there. I miss them dearly. They're all great. I miss the guys in the locker room. They're all great guys that were in the locker room there with us. I think the WPW locker room that we had for the last 2 years was the best locker room I've probably almost ever been in my entire career. All those guys are top-notch professionals. But it was just time to move on, man. I mean, so many people want it to be dramatic, and who'll give us the dirt? What's the dirt? And I'm kind of the guy sitting here, well, what does it matter? It doesn't matter. It was one of those things where we ran our course. We took it as far as we could take it. We did as much as we possibly could do with the time that we had. And then it's just time to say, hey, you know what? This isn't working anymore. And let's be adults about this, and I'm going to go my way and do my thing. You stay here and do your thing, and we're fine. And then move forward and try to coexist, which obviously isn't always easy to do. I mean, there's people that are very passionate about what happened on both sides of it, that don't know the whole story, and it is what it is. But I don't regret my decision to leave. It was time. I appreciate the time that I had there. There was good times, there was bad times, there was ugly times, there were times where it was everything in between. But it was just it was one of those things where I didn't want to do any harm to WPW and stay and it was one of those things where leaving now was better than staying and it's almost like a marriage where like you're staying just for the kids. Like, it's not good, because then when you leave later, then it's going to be 10 times worse. So it was one of those things where it was just time to move on and leave. And obviously, as you've seen, WPW is still running. It's still a machine that goes. And I'm focused all on Frontline Pro stuff now. Going forward, obviously it's my passion project, and I'm gonna stick with that. And I mean, don't get me wrong, people still hit me up about it and stuff like that. But I don't really try to pay too much attention to what they're doing. I'm sure they're doing just fine. They have very capable people there. But I'm not, it doesn't have anything to do with me, so I'm not really, taking an interest in it, I guess.
Fair enough. Honestly, I probably could not ask for a better answer. So for those of you that are kind of curious on what happened, you got your answer right there. So moving on from that, obviously you do mention, Frontline Pro. This kind of came out of the blue for me, I think it was about, a year or so ago when it finally started up and people are talking about it. Like, okay, well, we got a new wrestling thing in Wisconsin. What's going on with this? And what was kind of like, what kind of, brought on this creation of making Frontline Pro into an actual reality?
Man, let's see here. Well, I was still in WPW at the time when I came up with the idea of it, and the whole point of it wasn't to, contest with anybody else or be a threat to anybody.
Okay.
It was one of those things where I had went and I had spoke at my high school for Veterans Day, and 3 days there, and I talked about action and taking action, and how words aren't enough, and how you need to apply more to help out the people around you. And then 3 days later, I lost my 14th guy to suicide, and it was kind of that eye-opening moment where it was like, you need to take your own advice. How can you help the veteran community? How can you help your brothers that have taken their own lives? How can you help their families? How can you do something? How can you live up to what you're preaching to these kids and not be a hypocrite? And wrestling was the avenue, the best avenue I had to do that. And so in December, I kind of thought about how to get it done. In January, I had things in place ready to go. We made our announcement in January that it was happening, and then we promoted the hell out of it for 2 months. We drew for a town of 1,200 people, we drew 268 people in a building that can hold 275. So it was a great turnout. We had a phenomenal show. And it was awesome because we raised money for the Brady Oberg Legacy Foundation. And Brady Oberg was actually a guy that I served in Afghanistan with, that when we came home, he took his own life. And he was one of those guys that was extremely important to me in Afghanistan. He always had the answer. He was always squared away. If I ever had a question or I didn't know what to do or I needed a little bit of military guidance, he always had some form of information for me. And he was just an all-around good guy. And so his wife, and now his widow, and his mom created the Brady Overg Legacy Foundation, and we were able to raise funds for that. And I was really proud of that. And and then we kind of took off from there. Frontline was kind of a beta test last year. We weren't trying to run every month. I'll never run a wrestling show to run a wrestling show, if that makes sense.
Okay.
Like, I'm not in this to make a ton of money. I'm in this to give back as much as I can. And I guess that's kind of makes me sacrilegious because, everybody in wrestling is like, well, if you ain't here to make money, you ain't here for the right reasons. Well, I ain't here to make money. I mean, I'm here to I'm not looking to lose money either. But at the same time, I'm looking at my bottom line is the most reward that I get out of this is to give back to other causes. And, Frontline Pro, for only doing, we did the Spencer show, we did a show in Marshfield, we did a show in Stratford, we did a show in at the Great Lakes Naval Base, and then we went back to Marshfield again. Technically those are only 5 shows, but we counted them as 8 because one of those deals with the naval base was 3 days long, and we did 2 shows each day, but we just kind of combined, just that each day was an overall show, part 1 and part 2.
Okay.
And so we did 5 events and raised $8,000 for charitable donations last year, and we can do more this year. We've already done really well this year in Two Rivers as well as in Spencer. We went back to Spencer a couple weeks back and had a really great show there and raised money for the kids group. And now we have Stevens Point coming up, and we Stevens Point, we're so excited about. Our front row tickets sold out in 7 minutes. We had, I think we're over 200 tickets in sales right now in pre-sales. So it's going to be a huge show, and we're really, really excited to rock Point.
Man, and honestly, just hearing like this kind of purpose behind wrestling organization. I mean, there's always those certain people that say it's for this person, it's for this person. But to hear that it kind of serves 2 purposes. One, to give wrestling back to the community, but also to give back to the community for other causes. That is actually one of the best reasons to go and support Frontline Pro. It's honestly really awesome.
Absolutely, man. And it wasn't just the other thing too is if you look in Central Wisconsin, there is no wrestling.
True.
And we want to bring stuff in that people haven't seen before. We want to bring in the entertainment that they can enjoy. A long time ago, I think it was one of the first days I was training, I was asked, why do you want to do this? Like, what does it mean what do you want to get out of wrestling? And at the time, I just wanted to give back to wrestling what it had given to me, which was, I was super bullied as a kid. I was definitely not popular by any stretch of the imagination. I got a little bit saved in high school, my junior and senior year, because I was decent at sports. Not good, decent. It became one of those things where it became a safe haven for me. And so what I wanted as a young wrestler was if I could give that kid 10 minutes of their life where they could unplug their brain from the real world and be in my reality and tell them a story. And for that 10 minutes, they don't have to worry about being bullied. They don't have to worry about having a bad at-home life. They don't have to worry about having bad grades. They don't have to worry about any type of stress in their life. Then that's worth it. And if I can have that single mom who, took out her tips money to just buy the tickets to come to that show and still is behind on rent, and if for 10 minutes she can forget about all that, then it's worth it. And if I can get that dad who's working 80 hours a week and literally is dead dog tired but just does this for his kid because his kid is such an avid wrestling fan, that for that 10 minutes, that I'm going to make sure that I do everything in my power to help him unplug his brain from the real world and to just be immersed in a different reality that doesn't have any of the real life stresses, which is what I think the beautiful and most wonderful part of professional wrestling is that when you get into a match, when you see a really solid, amazing wrestling match, you forget everything that's around you. And there isn't a whole lot of entertainment nowadays that does that for you. And that's why wrestling is always going to be so special to me.
Yeah, honestly, that's absolutely fantastic. It's definitely one of those things where you're definitely trying to reach out to other people to say, hey, take time away from reality to enjoy this and just to have fun. And I think that's really something that a lot of people forget is to actually just have fun with life. And I think that's what really, like you said, brings a safe haven to a lot of people, is that they can go to professional wrestling. They can, they don't have to be, the person behind, wearing a suit. They don't have to be a person just being a yes man or something like that. They can actually enjoy something and be with people who are that passionate about the same deal.
I agree. Yeah, absolutely.
It is honestly really cool to see that. And you do talk a lot about your life, and it seems like it's going to definitely be one of the focal points in the new movie that's going to be coming out, Still Here, that, again, is one of those things that I just got made aware of. So what kind of brought about this movie of Still Here, and what are some of the things that you could tell us about this movie that some people might not know about?
Dumb luck again. I'm not that interesting. It's just right place, right time, man. No, I had when we did the first Frontline show last year, I met a veteran named Eric Beach, and Eric owns his own production studio called Redchester Productions.
Okay.
And he and I were friends and had kind of talked about other stuff. And going into last fall, we kind of brought up the movie premise of doing a documentary, and we kind of talked to each other. And he has connections in Hollywood and in places like that, and so he kind of reached out to a couple of people, and we decided at the show A Night for Tyler in October of last year for Frontline that we'd film a little thing, 3-4 minutes long, and just we'll just see what happens. I mean, if we'll put it on Facebook, and if it gets a couple hundred views, obviously this isn't that interesting. We don't need to worry about it. If it gets like 2,000 views, then maybe we'll try something. If it gets 3,000 views, we're definitely going to at least do like a 10-minute thing or something to follow up with it. And then I wound up getting like 10,000 views. So it kind of like blew us out of the water of holy crap, this is insane. I can't believe that this many people have viewed this. And we reached out to Tim Abel, who's an actor out in Hollywood, and a good friend of Eric's, and he loved it and started pitching it around, and we wound up, right after Christmas, 2 days after Christmas, we got major funding for it, and then we did an Indiegogo, and we got more funding. We're on our second Indiegogo right now, and we've got even more funding, so we're not making money, don't get me wrong, but we're covering our bases, so we're not putting ourselves in a hole by doing this, and we just were able to link up with F5 Soundhouse out of Minneapolis. Owen Satori and his group over there are going to be writing an original score as well as a soundtrack for the movie now. That's all done and in place, so we're really excited about that. And going back to Tim Abel, Tim had a really good friend that he had done a movie with that starred Steven Seagal, and that guy was Rob Van Dam. And he told Rob about it, and the next thing you know, Eric's calling me, and he's like, "Hey, Ben, I'm going to call you on Wednesday night at like 10 or 11. You good?" I was like, "Sure. I don't sleep. That's fine." And then he called me without letting me know what was going on, and the next thing you know, he's like, "Hey, what's up? It's Rob Van Dam." And I was like, "Hey, hi, how are you?" And, I was not ready for that or prepared for that. A lot of people know that are my friends and stuff like that, or my family, that Van Dam's on my top 4 all time of like guys who influenced me as a wrestler, and guys that were like primarily my favorites growing up. And he decided, hey, he had just done his documentary Headstrong, which, by the way, you can catch on Fight TV or Vudu or iTunes. I highly recommend it. I watch it. You even see a short uncredited cameo of myself in it. It's a great movie that really talks about Rob's journey and what he's doing with his life now. But Rob had so much value to us because of doing his, not just because of his wrestling. Obviously, his wrestling speaks for itself. I mean, I think we can all agree he's someday going to go into the Hall of Fame. Like, it's just kind of a matter of time. I think we can all, bank on that happening. But the biggest thing with Rob for me was the fact that not just the wrestling aspect, but the fact that he had went through the documentary making process. He had just done 2 years of filming and putting his stuff together. And so I thought his insight and his knowledge would be so valuable for us to get stuff moving. And Eric agreed, and Eric was the guy who made all of it happen. Eric's been phenomenal putting this whole thing together. There would absolutely be no movie without Eric Beach. I can't put the guy over enough. He does everything that there is to do to make this work and make me look not half bad. So we went from there, and we just started filming full-time in February, and we're going to be filming until the end of the year, and we're filming all over the place. I'm working for Zello down in Chicago. We just work for freelance. We're filming. We're hoping to film in Vegas and Minneapolis later this year. And we've got a lot of guys on board that are helping out. Ken Anderson is awesome and helping us out with the documentary. And it's just kind of the basis and the reason we're doing it isn't just to I don't want to have a grandeur project that's just about my ego or to feed my ego or to look, Ben's so amazing. That's kind of the first thing I told Eric. I don't want to do that, but I wanted to use my story as a vehicle to connect other people's stories and to help our veteran community as well as the civilian community with post-traumatic stress disorder and with suicide awareness. And that's the main focus point of the movie, because I was very lucky. I got all the breaks. I had an amazing wife. My wife Crystal is phenomenal and is super tough on me and makes sure that I stay straight and narrow on a lot of stuff, but not in a bad way, but in a very good, holds me accountable and takes care of me. I don't deserve it, but I'm very lucky. And I have my kids that are amazing, and they're growing, and they're smarter every day. And, I have wrestling that has given me the outlet to, whenever I have that anxiety or whenever I have that depression or whenever I have that bad day, I have wrestling where I can go and I can get it all out. And I can have that avenue to kind of release everything. And, a lot of guys don't get that. There's a lot of guys that come home, they're alienated from the get-go. Because, just try to imagine going to a war zone, staying there for a year, and every day somebody wants to kill you. It's not, and I know people have said that before, and people are like, oh yeah. No, literally just take a second and think. The first thought in your head every day is, someone's going to try to kill me today. And then when you go to bed, trying to go to sleep, knowing someone's going to try to kill me tomorrow, or right now in my sleep. And having to live with that type of awareness for a year. And then you get done with that, you come home, you're half military, you're kind of okay yet because you still have the military presence, you still have your brothers, you still have, your command, you still have the military lifestyle. It's bad, but it's not as bad. And then all of a sudden one day they go, well, thank you for your service. They shake your hand, they give you a medal, they give you a certificate, and out you go. And I remember walking out of the doors in Fort Sam Houston, Texas after my last day, which I'll never forget. It was July 25th, 2013. And literally walking out the doors going, oh my God, what do I do? Because I didn't know at that point how to exist without the military in my life. And there's so many guys that feel that way, that when they get out, they don't know how to live as a civilian anymore. You have to understand, your brain is completely rewired for the 17 weeks you're in basic training. And then it's completely rewired for when you go on deployment or when you live on an actual base. They live by a different standard than in the civilian world. And now all of a sudden, all that's stripped away and gone from you, and you have to just somehow figure out how to finding a way to go back to being what you were at 25, and it's not, and that was for me. For other guys, that go in there, they go in at 18 years old, they get out at 24, or they get out at 28, and they have to go back to the civilian world where they haven't been for half a decade or a decade, and how do you do that, and there's not a lot of programs out there to help with the transitioning. Everybody's like, well, they can just go to the VA. Trust me when I tell you from first-hand experience, that's not the answer. We as a society need to build a gap, or build a bridge in the gap that we have for transitioning soldiers. It's one of those things that it would be nice to have. It's a requirement. We need to have that in place drastically sooner than later. There's a reason almost 20 guys or over 20 guys kill themselves every day that are in the military. And that are veterans. And it's because there's no transitioning for them. And some people can live with it for 6 years and then kill themselves. And other people can live with it for 6 months and then kill themselves. Now I've known soldiers that have gotten out of the Army and 6 days later killed themselves. And it's one of those things where we had the opportunity to help and we didn't do it. And there needs to be a transitioning facility in every major city, in my opinion, in every state in the United States, to help soldiers that are transitioning. A place that gets them back on the feet, helps them go back to, like, you have to remember, you don't do your own taxes when you're in the Army. Like, they have people that you have an appointment to go do your taxes. You go talk to the tax person, they do your shit for you. Like, everything is through them. You don't do anything on your own. So now you have to do everything on your own. Car payments are back on your own. They have financial advisors at the base to help you with that while you're in the military. They have stuff where it says, okay, this is your paycheck, these are your bills, this is how you have to do this. And all of that support and all that stuff is gone. It's literally just this steep drop off of the cliff when you get out. So it's something that's got to get fixed.
No, I definitely full-heartedly agree. And it's kind of bizarre, but this kind of makes this whole entire thing go full circle, because we kind of started off talking about how, early days of wrestling, there wasn't that support. And now that we're in a new age, we have that support to, help others build each other up and get them to that point where they can be at their greatest. It's kind of the same way with, you're talking of the military. They need to have that support to be able to, to make it through life, to be able to be, able to somehow get some sort of normal life out of their lives, basically.
Absolutely.
And honestly, that's one of the best things that I could say is what Frontline and what, you're definitely doing. I definitely do appreciate the fact that, you're one of those people that are expressing your voice and your opinion about that, because it's not just opinion, it's true facts. You've basically talked everything about what has happened, and you base it on real-life situations, so it's one of those things where it's like, this is not something that's, something to be taken lightly. It needs to be so focused on. We need to support them.
Absolutely, and it's one of those things where, that's another reason Frontline kind of happened, man. Is I was done waiting for other people to do something, and so wrestling is the best avenue I have to help people. It's the best way that I can help people. It's the most effective way that I can help people. So I'm going to take what wrestling has given me and pay that forward to other people that deserve it. So that's the whole point of Frontline, man, and that's why we're rocking and rolling with even more shows this year than last year. So.
And definitely, I'll be one of the many people that would say this to you. Thank you so much for doing that. It is awesome to see that. And guys, we're going into the cheap plugs deal. We're definitely going to be talking about a lot of things that are going on this year. First, starting off with you, Ben. This is usually where I give my guests the opportunity to plug their stuff, shows that they got coming up, any ways that they could talk to them on social media or something like that. So by all means, the floor is yours. Plug away.
Oh, man, plug away. Well, first and foremost, this weekend, March 23rd, I will be at GLCW Wrestling for Great Lakes Championship Wrestling in Cedarburg, Wisconsin, at the show called GLCW for Life, featuring WWE Hall of Famer Kevin Nash. And that's going to be an exciting time. I'm excited for that. And then the following weekend, I am wrestling somewhere that I can't remember because I kind of got put on the spot with this. And then the following weekend after that, we're in Stevens Point, Wisconsin for Frontline Pro number 10, featuring Ken Anderson. And so on and so forth goes the train.
All right, sweet. Definitely, guys, get a chance to check out Ben's matches, whether they're on YouTube, whether they're on any sort of deal. They're absolutely wonderful. Definitely check them out. Check out Frontline Pro on their Facebook fan page. Just type in the search engine Frontline Pro, and you're going to find that. Give them a like. Check out their events. They may be coming to a city near you, especially in the state of Wisconsin. Definitely check that out. Also check out a lot of the stuff that Ben's got going on. It's going to be great, including the movie Still Here, which will be premiering possibly next year. Is that what my understanding is?
August of 2020.
August of 2020. Holy cow, that's the same day I turned 30. I'll be 30 that. Oh my God, I'm getting old.
Join the club, man.
Oh boy. But guys, you definitely know where to find us on Facebook. Give us a like there. You definitely know how to find me on Twitter. Tonight I'll be in Chicago for Monday Night Raw, and I'll be back in Chicago later this week for C2E2. Definitely check us out for that. It's going to be absolutely awesome. So before we close out the show, one final question to you, Ben, and that is a question that I've always had whenever I've had special guests on here. When you look back on your career and you want people to remember you for something specifically in your career, it could be anything, what would you want people to remember for the most?
I have two things. For the fans, it would be, I just want to be known as the guy who left wrestling better than he found it. And for the boys in the back, I hope I'm always known as the guy that when you saw your name, the verses thing, and then my name, you knew that you were going to have a great night because you were in the ring with me. So that's it.
Excellent. Definitely awesome. Well, guys, we are just about out of time for this show. So, Ben McCoy, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for being a part of this, and thank you for taking the time to talk about everything that's going on. And looking forward to seeing all the success that Frontline has going on. Unfortunately, I have mentioned the fact that I will not be available for the Frontline show in Stevens Point, but don't expect to have some kind of game changer present at that show. So definitely, it's going to be awesome. But again, Ben, thank you for your time.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Not a problem. So for Ben McCoy, I've been Nate the Effing Great. I will talk to you guys in the next episode. Bye-bye.